Hello, and welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club. I'd like to wish a good local time to everyone today. We appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to join us. This is Future of Manufacturing, where we have lively conversations with a focus on tech and manufacturing, where we discuss future industrial technologies with experts in their fields. I'm Carol Mitchell-Lynn. I'm a content marketing professional in the area of advanced manufacturing for 6 years. For well over a year, I've been a regular co-host of Women in Manufacturing, having conversations with the I-40 Club along with my co-host, Grace Donovan. I'm your co-host for today, along with your regular host, Ira Sharp. Hi, Ira.
Hey, Carol. I was hearing double audio there for a minute, but I think I had something messed up. So my name's Ira Sharp. I'm the director of marketing at a company called Phoenix Contact. And, when I'm not doing that, I love to have or spend some time here having great conversations, about Industry 4.0. And I think we have a great discussion here today about IT/OT convergence. So I'm really looking forward to get started in this.
Thanks, Ira. And yes, today we're pleased to have as our special guest Steve Bélanger, who's joining us from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Steve is the engineer of cybersecurity operation technologies at BBA Consultants. Hi, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me this afternoon. Great to be here with you.
We really appreciate you taking time to be with us today, Steve. Okay, Ira, pass it on to you.
All right. Well, great, Carol. Thanks a lot. So before we get started here, the genesis of this conversation here today well, at least for the dialogues that we had here with Steve, was I made a post a couple of weeks ago, and the post was titled "IT and OT Convergence, and It's Inevitable." And the one thing that I've definitely found is if you want to find some polarizing topics and conversations that happen, particularly here on LinkedIn, is you combine the letters IT and OT together, and it creates for some great dialogue. And I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a great topic. And in that post, there was a host of healthy discussions, and one of the people that joined in and really provided some good guidance in that post was Steve. And Steve is joining us here today to unpack some of that and just to share some of his experiences in this area here. And as we get started with him, Steve, I'd like to flip it over to you to maybe give everybody a brief introduction of who you are, where you are, and then we can get started on the topic of IT/OT convergence. Steve?
No problem, Ira. So I'm Steve Bélanger. I'm a computer engineer in the last 20 years or so. Started as an embedded software developer for industrial devices. Had some opportunities in IT CCTV systems, moved into the rail car industry as a system engineer, evolved after my master degree into consulting. I'm working for BBA Consultant as of now, did some DCS automation project in the oil and gas industry, and now I've shifted into cybersecurity as a steady duty at BBA Consultant, especially for ICS systems.
Yeah. So, being a consultant in the chemical area and all these kind of things, it's obviously, I mean, it's critically important everywhere, right? But when you think about cybersecurity, a lot of people's minds, maybe not directly in the OT space, their minds don't go this way, but a lot of people's minds just go to computers and office buildings and data centers and keeping data protected and these kinds of things, keeping my laptop up to date, or making sure I can't get to particular websites or use my thumb drive. But in the OT space, it's really different, because what you're dealing with is continuous process, probably continuous process, might be batch process, but it's not as easy as, well, hey, something's not working, restart that, or hey, let's go make sure we have the latest and greatest Windows running and just install that update and we're off to the races. Oh, there was a driver problem, we'll fix it later. There are major differences between the IT and the OT space. Fundamentally, what do you think are some of the premier differences between those two elements?
Well, in IT, picking up a fundamental value is pretty straightforward. It's either availability, integrity, or confidentiality. And one could ask, what is it different in OT? Well, the fundamental difference, the thing that drives the show, is the actual physical safety, because operation technology control physical systems. So it has real consequences on the world. It's not some exchange server was down. It's not user that can log because of Active Directory. Although cyber attack can be pretty nasty for a business, but having an environmental problem, breaking down equipment, having a spillage and making the front page of your local newspaper is just as bad. And you need to accept this fundamental difference that whenever there are safety consideration, cybersecurity that comes along will have a very, very different shade of it.
Yeah. So, so and that's an important thing to think about because yes, I mean, Target or whoever else getting hacked for credit card numbers is bad, and a
It
lot of
is.
people can lose, financial gains, and it's something to really consider. But in your space, a spillage not only looks bad for a company, but it could be really dramatic for everybody in the local area. I mean, it could potentially be very harmful for everybody around, and it's something very serious to consider. You know, I guess high level, what are some of the things that, from an OT perspective, doing ICS? I guess first of all, can you tell us a little bit about ICS, kind of what it is, and what are some of the things that you really need to dig into, or principles that you kind of follow?
Yeah. So ICS, just in case, stands for Industrial Control System. So just to make sure everybody is using the same acronym. These are basically some dedicated system controlling a physical process to output something, whether clothing, paper, chemicals, minerals, everything. So these are basically a blend of IT technology and specific vendor technologies being assembled in an industrial environment to output something like a second transformation and so on. And so once you get a grasp of this, you clearly see the stark difference in between cybersecurity and your own personal safety in this environment. It's not to say there's no control, but you need to be very conscious about what you're engaging in daily activities in OT environments.
hmm and when you say, you need to be cautious about what you're doing within a daily OT environment, are you talking about from a physical standpoint? Are you talking from a network standpoint? Is it yes? I mean, what types of things are you talking about?
All of it. So my colleagues and I, we tend to advocate for cybersecurity by design, and it can come really really far. So physically and logically separated system, let's say dedicated Active Directories, dedicated firewalls for some key network segments, and it goes on because you might see some logical separation of any given equipment whenever there's a vulnerability or human error, which happen more often than cyber attacks. You can bring a whole facility down. I've got colleagues of mine who were working on a SAN system claiming that, yeah, the backplane is completely redundant and that's fine, but a wrong firmware upgrade brought the whole facility down. So there are no cutting corners because you get to see the obvious, and for most of the companies we work with, this is the money printing machine. So whenever production stops, this is where the huge losses come from.
Yeah, and also too, in a lot of these operations, I mean, production, yes, it can always stop, but it needs to come to a graceful stop, and
Mhm.
just coming to a cold stop can be disastrous in its own right.
You can
So,
have loss. If you were to stop some equipment in an unordered manner, they can be breakage, you can injure people, or even worse, issuing commands in the wrong moment during maintenance and injuring or killing people.
mhm.
It doesn't happen every day, hopefully, but it is a likely outcome if you're not cautious in OT ICS environment. So basically, from our IT counterpart wanting to a better understanding of what's on the other side of the fence is the physical risk. And you would be surprised how some professional just remaining in the office like IT environment For a OT company, don't understand the physical risk. You really need to go in there on the plant floor with your safety boots and understand what's at play. And you don't get very often this opportunity, but this is where game day happens.
Mhm. Nobody wants to, not I shouldn't say nobody, but many don't want to lace up the boots and go on the factory floor and look
Oh,
what's happening there. So,
but the step is really hard. It's a huge learning step. So one needs to be guided around. So
hmm
we did it because it was part of our duty, but they don't do yearly daily tour of what's in there in a OT environment. They're really really busy just operating and maintaining the plants. So they don't have much time for visitors. Let's say.
right, right, and it's on both sides too, because from an IT perspective, it's not like they're not busy either doing a bunch of things. So, it's really just a matter of really understanding what kind of system overall you're dealing with. So, um, so can you take us through? You had provided, I think this is a good place to chat about it, but I'm thinking of like, okay, if I'm an IT professional and I'm watching this, or an IT professional and want to understand better what you're talking about from an OT standpoint, um, you know, you had provided an image, and I think that kind of illustrates a little bit about what an overall system is and what the values are and these kind of things. And Carol, maybe you can bring this up. And Steve, is it possible for you to take us through this, to explain this in a little bit of detail? And just for reference for anybody that's watching, this was something that I think was very eloquently put as a comment on the post that was from a little while ago and was supported through some documentation or from some comments on your side, and really looking at this ITOT convergence, and you didn't really think it should be, and this is one of the points of evidence that you had. So Steve, can you take us through this?
Yeah, for the IT/OT convergence discussion, I was the one throwing this brick in the pond just to get some attention, I guess. But
I caught it.
but whenever you want to go onto OT, one needs to understand the actual process safety model that it's been advocated for quite a while. This one is really dominant in the oil and gas industry, but I'm pretty sure other counterparts can relate to it. So from the bottom, you get the process design is basically is your chemistry or your conversion process safer from a mechanical or a physical or chemical standpoint. So if you're mixing highly explosive stuff, can you make it less explosive? So at least you're just having some safety gains in at this level. The second layer is the process control, basically those proprietary devices, whether PLCs, DCS, some will say SCADA. Are these systems correctly programmed and engineered to make sure everything is safe in there and you have decent control strategy for the things that you're mixing up in your OT environment? The second layer is the operator intervention, namely alarms. So in the industrial realm, automation system will raise alarm whenever something goes off course, requiring operator intervention. We do have some struggle for that regard because just like false positive in IT, system tends to raise a lot of alarm, and if they go unattended, it's just overwhelming the human operator. So alarm management is a science by itself, just to make sure we keep everything under control. But at this layer, we're requesting external intervention. Should all fail, and this will ring a bell to our oil and gas colleagues, there's the safety instrumented system. It's basically a dedicated system to reach a safe stop. But it can be harsh. Just like your car, you have brakes. The SIS could be seen as the airbag. So you are safe. It's hard, but at least you have some active system trying to cushion some hard stop for you. Afterwards, you have active protections. Now we're going into, but at this level, we're just, the first one were preventive, but now we're reaching the prevention. So uh, environmental release happens. So something might be leaking out, especially for the active system, pressure relief valves and PSVs. So basically, mechanical component that will blow up just to make sure you don't blow the whole thing. Just like at the top of your if you have a hot water tank at home, there's a pressure relief valve at the top just to make sure you don't blow with it and it doesn't become a frag grenade in there. The red layer, the passive system, now it's getting real bad. So you might have a collapse of a tank and you need something to contain. So you may have a dike around in a pond to retain what happened, or you might have double wall facility just to make sure you control a blast. Now it's a real blast. And at the black layer, it's the emergency response plan. So you're basically making your local newspaper front page because police officers and fire crew are coming in to help you out contain your disaster. So it's a escalation. So you're trying to have all of those layers ready just in case it's going to be doomsday.
Yeah. And I really like this diagram. And when you posted it, it hit home for me because it was really taking a physical system, right? And I looked at this, and the lens that I used is, and I went, good, because when I think of any IT system or security type system, the common methodology, or a common methodology, of course, is defense in depth. And at different layers, you have different types of defenses, and it's the same thing that you're
The-
dealing with here, and looking at it from a physical standpoint rather than just an information standpoint or a networking type standpoint.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
you want to prevent as many things as
this
possible,
is
but
the,
when something happens, and then something happens, and then you're
it's a
making the front
safety
page.
onion just like other domains. And I was thinking about, are we missing some kind of a cyber layer in this model? Maybe, maybe not. I'm open for some comments from the community because in the past we used lots of proprietary system. They did not have external connectivity, or it was so rare that problems were not found. But now, as we're having more and more general purpose technologies, Ethernet, switches, servers, and we're having a more and more connected world, it's much easier to external threats reaching those industrial processes. And is should we dedicate or not one layer of protection for cybersecurity? This is an open question for now, but it needs to be tackled with.
Yeah.
Steve, I'd like to step in for 1 second
Yep.
and go back a little along with the blue layer, the design layer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm familiar with cybersecurity with the controls when you're designing your
Mm-hmm.
plans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're including the OT in that, are the controls laid out sufficient enough, or are they missing some areas where there's a gap that needs to be filled?
As of now, the way controls are designed, they're designed to control. They're not designed out of the box to defend themselves against cyber attacks. And some might say cybersecurity, you can flip the medal and see behind its reliability. So you might have the latest and greatest control system architecture. If this facility goes unattended, there are no security patches, no updates. Some might say pen testing, but some static analysis of the actual plant network may leave some known vulnerabilities. So if this go unattended, its reliability or cybersecurity will decrease over time. So it's not a static defense. Cybersecurity cannot be handled like a one-time project. It's a blend of process, people, and technology, and it's just like gardening. There's always things you need to weed out, and if you let it go for too long, you got a heck of a job in front of you. It is what it is, and is this lack of maintenance in the OT realm that is biting most of the industry. We're so far behind in some aspect that it's really, really hard to keep up. So they were very good at physical safety, but the cybersecurity went unattended for way too long. So now we need to bring some balance in this field.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the attentiveness, first of all, you reminded me it's almost springtime and we got to get out there and start doing all of our gardening. So my back already hurts. So thanks for that. But um,
Same
but
here.
the attentiveness and staying after it, and not only getting started, but then once you've started, like, cybersecurity is not a thing. It's something that is continuously evolving, just like safety, right? So even with the diagram that you had up, there's these different elements of it, but you don't do that one time and it's done. You're constantly looking at it, you're evaluating, you're testing it, you're making sure it's okay, you're modifying it, and it's
Mhm.
got to be the same from an or from a cybersecurity perspective
Yeah.
as well.
W- One could say that cybersecurity in the OT environment really behaves like an ongoing maintenance plan. But as of now, with current staffing restriction, um, uh, instrumentation team are just struggling keeping up with broken instrument, broken equipments, staff shortage, staff turnaround. So if you add up OT as a supplemental step and you need to patch every month, you need to do assessment every 1, 2, 3 years or so. It's the plate is full.
Yeah, and so I mean I have a couple of questions with regard to that. I was looking at some of the questions here in the comments. We got a
Hmm.
few comments coming in from LinkedIn, and
Yep.
one of the questions I have, and yeah, I think it kind of hits one here, and it's something I have in my head. And Steve, I'm gonna ask you. You could even say you don't want to answer it because it's kind of a landmine. But
Yep.
where are you on the OT network versus the IT network? I mean, should there be? I'll refrain from using the word convergence, but I mean,
Yeah.
should they be connected at all? Should be completely isolated, air gapped, that type of thing?
Well, there's no such thing as air gap because you will find around maintenance laptop that go unattended and they can be used for maintenance in the day and other kind of entertainment at night. So lots of things go uncontrolled. So there are no such thing as air gap. But
Hmm.
one could have a much better architecture by doing so. But the explanation is not always given to IT people why we're doing so. So why do we want a separate Active Directory? Easy. The main For an OT perspective, the IT network is untrusted, not because they don't do a great job. You're always one click away from an email from a ransomware. So
Hmm.
as OT specialists, we need to be very, very cautious that you can have very advanced threat coming like a blitzkrieg from the IT network. So we should be very cautious. And one of the very first thing they're trying to have is domain credentials. So telling us you will share our vulnerability, so we force on you our domain is a very big liability for OT people. So that's why we tend to advocate for physically and logically separated stuff, just because it's by design. It's by no means easier, of course not, because you have two separate Active Directory, but you will not bring a whole facility down because somebody changed some OUs and user in there and the whole plan is down because the user don't have the right credentials.
Hmm.
So once again, the cybersecurity by design that we're trying to bring forward, not to make it easier from a management standpoint. It's all about resilience all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually 100% agree. So first of all, really happy to hear, that air gap systems don't exist, because I do think, and at a lot of organizations, they think that they're air gapped, but I completely agree. I mean, you have a USB port open or a whatever open, or someone throws up a hotspot, or I mean, there's so many different things.
It's a
Um,
changing environment, and maybe every 6 months or so, are you trying to look if somebody, because of some contractor and it's a genuine need, you have an off-the-shelf Best Buy wireless router to make it more convenient? Let's say you're in Canada, it's winter, it's minus 30 outside, you don't want to be next to the thing and freezing yourself out. So
mhm.
people don't do it out of malicious intent. Sometimes it's just forgotten doors, but it's still a caveat that we need to avoid.
Right. So, I mean, again, I coming back to that
Mhm.
that diagram that you had. I mean, that's almost like that process design and process control step where you're just trying to understand and physically connect, or separate yourself before you get into the alarming stages and some of these other things. That's
Even, but you can, as you mentioned before, you can even see it as another safety layer. So that's why in the previous graph, the basic control system has its own hardware and the safety instrumented system has its own hardware to reach a control but hard stop.
Mhm.
Same goes for OT. So that's why we prefer to have our own stuff on our side. The
Mhm.
thing we're missing out is the lack of maintenance, and some poor architecture. And some are doing a great job, but most of them don't. And it's a scary thing. We really want to keep the light up, but somehow, with the advance in the threats that we see, it's going to hit hard.
And I'm curious from your experiences
Mhm.
and conversations and things. So how well do you think architecture documentation is for different types of networks? I mean, in general, do you think it's pretty good? Could you use
I will
some?
base it on my personal experience because I don't want to send a message that nobody is doing it right.
Hmm.
It's a heck of a job maintaining documentation and architecture. I'm sure OT people are doing a great job, but from my personal experience, it's fairly weak, and it's weak because people are understaffed and just trying to keep up with the
Yeah,
daily struggle of maintenance, just like IT people are fulfilling some tickets, and very few people are actually having the cybersecurity title and being full time in there. That's the same. So some are maintaining change servers, and some are maintaining instrument and pumps and stuff. And in between, there's way too little. They're spread too thin. So that's why I'd like to bring those similarities in regards of ongoing maintenance.
yeah. So and yeah, I think you had mentioned a little bit of that earlier, and it makes perfect sense. We have a comment here from Scott Phillips, who's one of the founders of the
Hmm.
Industry 4.0 Club,
Yep.
and I think it's a good one because when you look at it from a small to medium manufacturer perspective,
Hmm.
there's going to be a common argument or conversation that'll be had with, if you're Coca-Cola and you have a big budget and you can put people on the topic of, cybersecurity and these kind of things are great. But, what about the limited resources that even may become even more limited if you're a small to mid-sized manufacturer? How can they deal with that? Do you have any ideas?
Well, personally, I think the impact is proportional. So whether Coca-Cola would have a large ransomware, they're gonna use X million scale to their production capabilities. If you're a smaller player, the hit's gonna be this in the same proportion for you. So you may lose a few 100,000. So and this yields onto the business risk management of the question. Are cyber risk in your OT environment escalated to your board of directors? Because how much money will you lose on an hourly basis should you have a plan down? That's the bottom line of the thing. And would you allocate, because it's a decision and status quo is the same. So what is your business risk compared to your investment in the matter? Because cybersecurity is one risk amongst other in business, but it needs to be correctly presented at the executive level. So the IT ones are fairly good, and you get the big fours doing a great job at board of directors, scaring the hell out of them. So that worked, and they're much cyber secure than they were before. But now we need to walk down that path into the OT realm. So that's why I think to separate them in separate realms. They're lagging behind, but this is where the money is coming from. How much do you lose?
Yeah.
Whether you're large or small, because losses will be proportional.
And I would add to that too. There's the financial risk, and this could all boil up to financial risk. But you mentioned it earlier. I mean, there's the reputational risk as
It
well,
is.
and and that's big. I mean, that
Yeah.
could be really big.
And another thing that brings some concern for me is cyber attacks are getting more and more costly. So insurers are having more and more problem keeping up. And there'll be a day that some company will realize, well, if you have a cyber attack in the OT, well, either you're not covered or it's not insurable. So you cannot throw good money at bad. You will need to fix thing by design someday
Hmm.
because the risks are increasing. Threats are being more and more advanced as time grow. So one should do a thing, and insurance won't be a lifeboat forever unless you're prepared and you did your due diligence and you're trying to improve your current posture. I see this as a growing trend.
Yeah.
Steve, I was wondering how you how you think companies are doing with on the training side, and do you
It's
think there's room for improvement?
uh, from the group we're coming from. It's one of the least funded, and it won with the almost immediate payback. So we should train more people, especially the awareness training, and get people involved. So, but yeah, not enough is invested in the people aspect, because, as one of my colleague says, technology alone provides very limited protection. Let's say you have a whole dashboard with system alerts. If nobody attended it or understand what's in play, your technology is basically worthless. So for every investment in technology, invest some of this money in people to become a real enabler. Otherwise, you will not benefit the full investment that you did in technology. I hear it. Oh, we have a very advanced EDR. I don't understand a thing of these alerts coming in. Oh, it's a it's very expensive to decipher something that you don't understand, right?
Yeah, so unrelated directly to the industrial industry, but I have this little device I actually have on my desk here.
Hmm.
I don't know if you know this company, Firewalla. If you don't, sorry, it's a little commercial. They're an excellent home
Hmm.
firewall device, monitors everything. I have 4 kids, so it helps me keep track. Are they playing Roblox or Fortnite when they're not supposed to, and all those kind of things. And it gives me a lot of alerts, gives me a lot of information, but can become very overwhelming at times. And understanding it, it's like, how can I make use of that? And then, when you talk about secure by design, I mean, I spend a lot of time setting it up, and it's pretty intuitive. It's a very
Hmm.
user-friendly device. I highly recommend it. Um, Josh Verries from Traceroute actually recommended it to me a while ago.
Hmm.
But my 10-year-old defeated it like very quickly, where he was on YouTube and I shut off YouTube, and then he has an Apple device and he clicked a button that randomized his MAC address. He even know what he was doing, but then all of a sudden I'm not blocking YouTube for him anymore.
Hmm.
So, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. you know okay, he wasn't supposed to do that. We had a conversation about it. He just thought the system wasn't working anymore, so he found a workaround. And yeah, I
It's
don't think this is uncommon in
no
facilities.
simple as that. Your threat landscape evolves all the time. There are other caveats, some limitation of the product. So same as IT, there needs to be some OT cybersecurity steering committee at play. Understanding things are changed. It changed to a point that we doing a big overhaul for the plant. There's going to be like 20 contractors rolling in and out. So all those changes need to be accounted for in
Right.
your OT cybersecurity, but they are not. They mostly go unattended, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
it's not a destination; it's a journey.
So, uh, to go on that journey, you had provided me some documentation of something that people could read to follow.
Hmm.
Um, I think it was a very short 150 some page read, or maybe it was something like that. It
Yeah.
was, it was a fairly lengthy document. Are there some some guiding principles? Are there
Well,
resources there? Is there
well,
software available? What
but
are some of the things people can do?
most of the framework are actually best practices, which are packaged, and by themselves, any framework won't save it for you. You need to do the thing. But one good way to start, what I like about the NIST cybersecurity framework, NIST CSF, is these are publicly available
Great.
documents. So, because on each side of the fence, we don't share the same lingo. So, if you were to do threat protection, threat and identification, inventory management, it may ring a bell in IT, may not in OT. So, the great thing about the NIST, it's a fairly intuitive and small framework to bring everybody around the table understanding what's at play. And there are some more refined publication like the NIST 800 Special Publication 82 that explain in lengthy detail what's at play in an OT environment should any IT counterpart would like to have a read, and they can understand the challenges that we're facing and some of the key architecture that has been advocated in the OT area.
Okay. Good. Um, One of the questions in the comment here, I
Mhm.
think, is making it maybe a little bit simpler, but from
Mhm.
a software product perspective, is there something out there to protect, like the OT networks or the
Mhm.
IT networks
Ah,
separately?
it it comes in various shape and size. So there's no silver bullet for such. But one thing that is deeply lacking in OT is simple backups. I haven't seen some of my own customers having those great cyber vault from Amazon for the IT and nothing for OT. So they were basically telling me we have no money to back up key assets that are rolling paper out of here, which the company is making some money out of. So backup, malicious software protection, patches, the same basic moves that you would do in IT cybersecurity needs to be at play. So if you're doing none of this, it's a problem. But some updates are harder to do. So one may wonder, why are not we migrating those Windows XP terminals? Because the control system that comes along with it is legacy. It only works with Windows XP, and it's going to cost 15 millions to change it. So one needs to understand this and protect the facility accordingly. You may hide this behind a firewall or do different segregation rather than just saying upgrade your operating system. That's one path, but there are others. Because if you were to reprogram the thing, it's a few millions down plus the production losses. So they
Yeah,
are. So you cannot simply say update. Yeah, but in what order matter we could do so.
gotcha.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I actually really understand that. So of course, my day job, I work for the company Phoenix Contact. It's a well-known company in
Mhm.
industrial control cabinets in general, from terminals to automation. And yes, we sell a lot of legacy components for exactly those reasons. I mean, yes, you can see the trend goes down, but people still even need new hardware to run some of that old software because there's no alternative. At least at this point, at least no easy alternative, and it
Yeah.
can be a challenge. So,
And the bottom line is how much profit we lose by the hour by having this system down. And sometimes it just doesn't make the cut, so you need to live with it.
yep.
But some you don't.
So there's another question here from Scott again, and I think it's an interesting one because particularly I think in the small to mid-sized manufacturers, it they don't always have the resources, and then if they do have them, they outsource them.
Hmm.
So they don't have always have a deep understanding of OT unless there's some firm out there that I'm not aware of that specializes in more like OT cybersecurity. Maybe this is a niche that can be filled. But what are your thoughts on this? I mean, do you have ideas?
I wouldn't say outsourcing is out of question, but it's very delicate. I've been in there while I was rolling into the oil and gas industry at oil terminal, and most of these OT facility are fairly custom. So you really need to learn the beast to steer it around. Otherwise, some risk will go unattended. And if it's your service provider that got hacked, now you have a problem.
Mhm.
J- j- do you remember how many password manager were hacked recently and credentials stolen? By no means, I don't say avoid the cloud, but it's just someone else's computer, so they are risk everywhere. It's just, are you accepting this risk as a business or
Mhm.
not? So should I keep it internally and I see the cost? Should I externalize it and reallocate my resources at other things that which are more core? It's more of a business decision, but there are risks involved, and we see growing chain of supply attacks. So do you have the right contractual agreement? So if your service provider got hacked, is he forced to divulgate that he's been breached or not?
Mm.
This you need to be aware. So it's the same. Your contractor is subject to the same cyber attack as you are, and is it a risk that you're willing to have and managing? That's the question.
Steve, I've been learning a lot lately about the energy sector,
Hmm.
and there's definitely within that ecosystems, there's different platforms and different partners involved.
Hmm.
Um, Wondering if you have a specific example in energy where that can cause a problem, like you mentioned, where if one partner is affected, so are you.
Well, we I haven't seen live example of cyber breach, but I get to come across lots of those dual network boxes, like those Porsman VPN boxes that you definitely know that the vendor is coming in your plan through this machine. And if anybody on the other side has advanced persistent threat, it's gonna come right at you. So one needs to be very, very cautious. It comes down to inventory management, and very few are doing it. So you just, some might say, avoid shadow IT. You do have also shadow OT. The same problems are at play.
I had not heard shadow OT before.
But I can tell you it's the same. We share the same challenges. You have shadow IT, you have shadow OT, and you're unaware of those risks because you're busy fixing pumps.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as a complete platform by itself, no, it's more of a complex design consideration that makes the deal and ongoing maintenance. There are no silver bullet. If I understand correctly your question, Carol.
From the energy perspective,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So, um, you know, go ahead. Did you have something?
Yeah. The difference about the energy sector is the FERC and the NERC are enforcing regulation on electrical distributor and generators. So that's why they're having quite a good cybersecurity posture. It's not perfect by no means, but for some critical infrastructure, they had to go down there just to make sure we keeps the light on. And they might also have other sector that will be subjected to a new regulation, especially the water and wastewater treatment plants, because you may have electricity. If you have no drinking water, it's no better. You get to see people driving by for not gas, but for drinkable water. So it can happen. We don't want to play as boogeyman, but you realize something is critical when you no longer have it. Electricity, fuel, your gas, your water, wastewater. So one needs to be cautious.
So, I am curious, and I think we talked about this
Hmm.
before we jumped on here. I don't think we talked about it here, but we may have. But so you mentioned about the password managers, and of course, LastPass was one of the big ones that had a
Yep.
breach. And I look at that and I go, okay, I was a LastPass user, but
Hmm.
you know, where do you draw the line? Because if you're self custodying your stuff, right? And there are different ways to do it. You could do it with pen and paper.
Hmm.
You could be my father-in-law who kept an Excel spreadsheet with white text,
Hmm.
because nobody could find that. These different types of things. Like, how far do you go to self custody and versus having somebody else take on some of that risk? I guess it's no different than insurance. How much do you
Hmm.
take on personally? Do you have comprehensive coverage for your car, or do you just have collision? These kind of things. Where do you see that, and how do you gauge that? I assume it's got to be personal, but where's your head on it?
Yeah, it's we tend to prefer manage your own things all the way by yourself. And then once you know what you have, then you can delegate to free up some time. But you need to know everything that has to be accounted for: your password management, the identity management, the patching and updates, the vulnerability assessment, the backups. You need to know, you need to control it by yourself first, and then you could delegate afterwards. Otherwise, they may not be prepared even to be hand over to a third party.
Hmm.
So you need to do your homework, and then you may consider transferring it. It's mostly, once again, a business decision. There are no one size fits all.
Right. So, yeah, I'm hearing that a lot, and I think we all just want the easy button.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of Apple because probably like a lot of people listening to this, I'm the tech guy in my family, so
Mhm.
when there's a problem, everybody comes to me for support, and I like everything to be easy, and with Apple, it just works. So,
It's so from
and it
your
does,
risk perspective, you pay a premium for prime hardware and
right.
software and play it. And I'm on the other realm. I'm an Android and Linux when I have some time. I'm not that proficient, but I still like it because I want to be in the inner guts of the thing and learning stuff. So it really depends on what kind of business you're
Right.
looking after. If you have 4 kids and just you just want the thing to work, that's fine. I only got one 7-year-old boy, so I've got some time in the evening.
Just wait, there's time. You'll lose all that later
There you go.
once
True.
sports and everything else.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
there's another question here. I think this is a good one.
Hmm.
So this looks at, I'm actually still reading, it's a longer one, but it's about data. It's from someone who's in the pharma industry looking at data protection. It's very important, and there's ITOT separation, and
Hmm.
looking at your thoughts based on your experience. What do you think the best practice would be um, to make this happen and be
The,
very secure?
well, first, having backups is one great step forward. Some don't. And by itself, whenever you're able to have encrypted data, because let's say you were to offload your replica elsewhere, just in case, you burn the whole thing. But if you have unencrypted backups, you might be in problems. So whether it's local or on the cloud, you're exposing valuable information to any kind of adversary. So
Mhm.
just like any good application, they keep calling like client-side encryption. That's one good way to start because you're fixing one thing, you're having backups, but you're exposing yourself elsewhere.
So, and I'm assuming this would dovetail into this, but
Hmm.
and again, I think we spoke about this a little bit beforehand, but as things move more
Hmm.
towards, and you can open up a can of worms here if this is something you're pro or against, but IoT, Industry 4.0, where from an OT perspective,
Hmm.
um, I would argue that there is more of a need today than ever before to improve operations, to for various reasons. It could be ESG, it could be for productivity, it could be for a mountain of other things. As this gears up more and you start to take more data from this OT system that may have been used by a SCADA before, but you're moving it to different types of business systems,
Hmm.
what are some best practices there? I assume encryption is part of that. I don't know, but what are your thoughts?
Might be because if you're opening new communication channels across IT and OT, you might be opening new vulnerabilities. So you really, really need to think about some, if you were to be hardcore as us, the least functionality. Do you really need this IIoT? Because who will open Wireshark and see if this wireless device has not been compromised? You may need it. I don't say don't go IIoT, but you really, really need to think about, are we overexposing ourselves by changing the plan topology?
Mhm.
But if there's a huge productivity gains and coordination and so forth, the reward is worth the risk. But it's a case by case. You just don't do it because it's cool, it's fun, or we're having more dashboards. Is there any significant yield increase in the plant facilities? There's significant information flow that we reach that overmatch the risk involved, and one should not be improvising itself. If you need to have a sound basis for cybersecurity if you were to venture into the digital transformation, especially for plants. But I think it's necessary, but it must be designed appropriately.
It's some good points here. So I have a couple of more questions for you, but we are nearing in at the end
Hmm.
of the time here. We still have a good 10 minutes or so, but
Perfect.
I wanted to make sure, I didn't know if is there anything in particular that you wanted to make sure that we discussed that we haven't already discussed before I run away with the conversation here, because Carol will tell you I can talk for a long
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah. Well, the point that we want to take out in the community, that the desired outcome is, we want our key facility having a better resilience. But what we need to work on the IT side, those one size fits all solution are sometimes not appropriate in the OT realm. And in reverse, in the OT realm, there's a huge technology gap and lack and maintenance that people needs to uh, slam the pedal to the metal and catch up because they're running late. I clearly see complete plans being run onto IT extended VLANs in the plan. So should there be any major threats, the whole thing is down for months and years. So everybody's got homework to do, but if we keep just w- talking in our own language, no real progress is made. So OT people needs to become better IT people and vice versa at understanding the key concept at play.
So you're saying there needs to be convergence between IT
Uh,
and
um,
OT.
uh, my reply was not convergence, but we need to have equal means. So you can have a good IT OT governance with some policies, similar policies that you abide, but the way you deliver your compliance against some policies will differ. So you may be forced in the IT to patch every Tuesday or whatever you want to, but in OT, you can have a specific standard and you patch every 3, 6 months or maybe every planned outage. So the delivery is different, but the overall result needs to be equivalent. So I wouldn't voice it as convergence because to me, convergence sounds like one size fits all.
Mhm.
We must meet equivalent measures in IT and OT. Otherwise, the whole business could go down for a while.
Yeah, and I'll say, so I made that post. It was a fairly popular post. They hit a couple of key points, and I'll say that my intent in doing that, it really rings true to what you just said, where um, I don't. The two organizations are definitely different, but there are commonalities, and they're fighting for the same good. Now, it does not mean that the tools, systems, and processes are exactly the same, but there needs to be an equitable respect and appreciation for what the other is doing.
Mhm.
And without that, with the head in the sand, is what I call it, on either side or both sides, it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
And that's where I think there needs to be kind of this common ground.
yeah,
Even a figurehead that literally is maybe someone that bridges the gap between the two. So when there are differences, they can speak to it and ultimately come to a decision or some sort of reason as to why we would do this or why we would do that. But
yeah.
understanding the boots on the ground from IT on the factory
Hmm.
floor, I agree.
Yep.
Is huge. And maybe there's reasons to go from OT to the IT space to see what considerations you need there.
Yep.
Yes, we're dealing with proprietary systems in a lot of cases, but at the end of the day, they're still accessible systems,
Yeah.
particularly nowadays as Ethernet is very prevalent. And who knows where it's all going to go because
Yeah.
there's newer infrastructure coming out, particularly for process where you have, SPE and APL. And I know these are years down the road, but this is going to extend accessibility
Yeah.
and the threat surface potentially way
Yeah.
bigger than we had before.
I see a comment from Conrad in the chat, and in a small company, the IT guys does it all. Yes, but are you really willing to maybe go bankrupt if your OT system goes down for a while because you're shaving on some salaries? You really need to get, if you accept this risk, it's up to you. If you don't, uh, well, look for the right people as soon as possible. But ideally, what we would like to have is hearing less and less. Let's say put a XDR in your OT environment and having as a reply, oh, we're air gap. No, there are no such thing as air gap, and some advanced IT practices may not be applicable in the OT as of now. It's like more of a step-by-step maturity that needs to be reached.
Mm.
I'm wondering, Steve, if I might be showing some ignorance in the roles involved, but when we talk about I-40, a lot of it is reskilling people that are already working. And I'm wondering if there's opportunity for people in IT to be specially trained and reskilled in OT.
Yeah, the reskilling typically happens in OT-like corporation. If you were to work at Chevron, Philips, Conoco, LyondellBasell, and all those heavy industries, you may have the actual live facility experience to go in there. It's really, really hard with the current training offering to understand the process safety mindset in there. It's not, it's mainly IT for now, but you may look for some live experience from those AV industry or have a tour of duty at BBA Consultants because we're hiring all the time. But If you're a proficient IT specialist with cybersecurity background, there's a very interesting career ahead of you in the OT realm, because we might be like 3 to 5% OT cybersecurity specialists, and the rest, the 95 percenters, are mainly IT. So we need to train our new counterparts with the existing staffing that we have available in the market.
And that's a really interesting thing you just said. As I've reached out and talked to various people that are involved in cybersecurity, whether
Hmm.
it be at a consultancy, whether it be at in a facility, or even if it's at some of the really big tech firms like the
Hmm.
AWS, the Google, the Microsoft, all these kind of places where you wouldn't necessarily think IT, but if they're dealing with cloud infrastructure, a lot of those
Hmm.
cloud architects and things, they're doing a lot of IT based type things. And the biggest gap is not necessarily on the IT side, it's on the OT side, right?
Hmm.
It's really understanding, having someone organizationally there that understands why things are just different. Why do you have that Windows 95 PC? Why
Hmm.
can't you just stop things? It's really a matter of it's crossing the chasm, right?
Hmm.
It's really getting over it and blending the two worlds together. And I see Conrad's providing a few other comments there, and
Yep.
he's looking for a system that can make things ready. And I'm hearing you say that you don't think that there is a system
Hmm.
today. There is no one size fits all. That's been one of my big takeaways from all of this.
Hmm.
And that's a challenge because there are a lot of tools in the IT space for monitoring and these kind of things. I wonder, is the OT space just not big enough? Is it a gap that hasn't been filled, or is it just so unique that it's just not possible?
Well, there's one winning recipe that I've seen with one of my customer in the United States. Maybe a good cheer to them at Air Products and Chemical in the United States. So, and what I realized working with them is what they did over time. They took very tech savvy IT people looking for plant-like experience, and they took the best plant people being a little geeky. They blend them for quite a few years, dispatch them across their different plant location, and this is how they got a great OT support team. So they're basically blending uh, electrical engineering and technicians along with one of the best IT and daring people they had for quite a few years, and now you have an OT core. So it's a blend of two separate worlds. So
Mhm.
this is one of their success stories, and they have a very efficient. They call it planned computing. They do have a very effective planned computing team, but they blend for quite a while different people with different background. One cannot succeed by itself because there's so much technology and knowledge at play that you need to bundle them all together just to make sure you have an adequate coverage.
Yeah. That's really good. And I mean, it really boils down to people, communication, and then executing and having a mutual respect between the different organizations. That's what I'm hearing,
See
right?
this as cross training. So
Yeah.
one OT to be more proficient in IT needs to interact with IT people, and IT people needs to have some safety boots and hard hats from time to time and understand the physical world at play. And now, when this happens, we get to see interesting unfolding things.
Okay. Good. Um, well, I know we're nearing the end of our time here.
Hmm.
So I'd like to just share a couple of the key takeaways that I had from our
Hmm.
conversation, and then Steve and Carol, if you have anything you'd like to add. I think this has been a great discussion, and overall, when I think about what we discussed about this IT and OT topic, is that communications is paramount, and this cross training would be really good to move things forward, and that if you're looking for a silver bullet, it doesn't really exist. So it's that's why this cross pollination is so important, because there is no one size fits all. That was the key takeaway. There are iterative things you can do. There are trainings that can happen, but it's there is no one size fits all, and really getting those experiences are key. And then there's this element that you said earlier on in the conversation. I know we really pushed hard on this one size fits all and this cross training, but it's this need to catch up. So there
Yep.
is this, I would call a technical debt for some other types of things where you don't want
Sure
to get too
does.
far in the hole before you have to catch up. And I see the same thing in the cybersecurity realm. So it exists now. It's something you should be considering. And the further you go down the road without considering it, it's just going to get you more and more in a need to catch up, and it's going to be harder to do.
It's a painful route out of the rabbit hole. Yes.
Right. So those were some of my key takeaways. Stephen, Carol, I don't know if you had anything else from this conversation that were key takeaways from your side.
I'd like to add, Ira, uh, a couple big takeaways were the challenge to address a changing landscape through the day-to-day. People, you mentioned, Steve, are busy with their day-to-day, and the changing landscape sometimes can get ahead of you. And I think that's something really needs to be addressed and find ways to get around that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just bringing the fundamental value that I wanted to my word around is OT cybersecurity is all about physical safety, and then it drives the show. And we need more cross training uh, all around this market.
Yeah. So, so Steve, I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah,
Really
same here.
appreciate you taking the time to come on and have this chat. And hey, maybe we can do it again sometime. This has been a fantastic discussion.
Whenever you want. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me this afternoon.
Okay, well, great. Well, for everybody that joined us here, really appreciate you coming on and spending the hour with us. If you're watching this on rerun, make sure you check out Steve online and check out the Industry 4.0 Club. We have great conversations every week, and just really appreciate you joining in on this conversation. With that, thank you all, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.